All right, thanks. So before we get started, I am obligated to say that today's discussion may include forward-looking statements. I'd point everyone back to our securities filings, Form 10-K, Form 10-Q, and all of our SEC filings that include risk factors and disclosures around the forward-looking statements we may be making today.
Hey guys, it's Adam. I just wanted to throw this in there before the actual video started. So I know everything regarding the Freemans, MindMed, and all this is just going to be really hard to navigate in general because there's just a lot of information out there. So I will do my best to just present everything to you guys in the most unbiased way possible. My goal ever since creating this channel, my YouTube show, is to just support retail in any way I can and basically help people gain knowledge on psychedelics and also psychedelic investing too, because my expertise does lie in the realm of investing and I'm very experienced with psychedelics. So, like, essentially, like, all I care about is forwarding the psychedelic movement and supporting retail and helping them make money. I don't care about CEOs. I don't care about people who are suing these companies. I don't care about any of this stuff except for retail. That's all I really care about because you guys need the most help in terms of getting accurate information and setting yourself up for success in regards to investing and whatnot. So, yeah, I just wanted to throw this in there. Support the channel by liking and subscribing and whatnot. If you enjoy the content I'm putting out, it really helps in general. And I look forward to bringing content that is in line with stuff like this in the future. My style when speaking to any of these corporate types, whether it be Barrow, whether it be Freeman's, anyone, is that I'm a pretty no-nonsense guy. I don't do all that fluff that a lot of these other that a lot of other interviewers do. There's no fluff to me. I'm pretty rough around the edges, and I just I ask things how they are. I pronounce words incorrectly all the time as well. I am who I am. Either take it or leave it. But at the end of the day, my whole goal here is just to support retail. And once again, why you'd want to come on my show in terms of to have a Q&A with me is that it's not going to be the typical Q&A with these guys who are just asking you the most generic, boring questions ever. You're going to have questions that are critical of the company, questions that are eye-opening, questions that investors really care about. And I just don't see that on any other YouTube channel. So, yeah, that's my cell phone. That's the end of my little intro. I hope you guys like this. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, everyone. This is Adam with psychedelicinvest.com. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful, wonderful end to your week. In today's episode, we're going to have Robert Barrow, the CEO of MindMed, with us. So this is very exciting, and I'm totally stoked to be covering this. And let's just, without further ado, I'll let Rob say hi, and then we can jump right into things.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here and talking to everyone.
All right, cool. So without further ado, we're literally jumping into basically there's going to be a mixture of Reddit questions, my own questions, and it's just a whole mixed bag of stuff here. So let's get right into things. All right, Rob, when did you realize that MindMed needed to raise more money? And how did the company determine that right now was the most effective time for dilutive financing?
Yeah, no, so I know that there's been a lot of interest and commentary certainly on the recent financing that we did and the money we raised in the third quarter of this year. Before I get into the rationale, I do want to clarify something, which is that we filed a shelf prospectus in May of this year. It was $200 million, $100 million of which was earmarked for an at the market offering, an ATM program. And all of our financings that have happened in the third quarter, including the one that just recently closed, the follow-on offering, happened under that shelf prospectus. So there's been speculation about new offerings, new prospectus. The offerings that have happened have been under what was already previously filed. Now, in terms of the rationale for the financing, so for any biotechnology company, hitting clinical milestones is critically important. The way we generate long-term value is by delivering clinical data, conducting clinical trials, getting hopefully positive data out of those trials, and taking a step closer to getting to FDA approval. So we look at the general market landscape, and this year has been an incredibly challenging environment for biotech. I mean, across the board, high quality, blue chip kind of companies and growth stocks and organizations like those that are working on psychedelics. When we look at that backdrop and we say, when is the financing window open to ensure that we have longevity well past our clinical milestones? Because a bad situation to be in is you get great positive data and you either have to slow down because funding isn't available because perhaps the funding window isn't even open, or you're at a position and a point in time where you have even trickier dynamics in the market for raising capital. So one of the fundamental principles of an emerging growth biotech company is to fund and to raise capital when it's available. And so the analogy is like, you don't wait till you're dying of thirst to take a drink of water, right? You need to get capital along the way to ensure you have that longevity. Now, I don't like dilution, just like no one likes dilution. No one wants to take on dilution. But in the end of the day, taking on capital, raising capital, and because we had an interest from high quality institutional investors that was expressed to us, it was an appropriate time to bring in additional resources and again ensure that we have that longevity well beyond our key milestones.
So in terms of the lining up the institutional, high quality institutional investor, was that lined up prior to the shelf offering?
Well, if you're referring to a shelf filing, I was back
I know you had
in
one
May.
on May 16th, right? And then the second one that was more recently. So why did you have why necessary to have two of those?
Yeah, again, just to clarify, so a shelf prospectus is a prospectus that is put in place under which you can raise capital. So 100 million of that shelf prospectus that was filed previously was for the ATM program. 100 million was for public offerings like the one that recently closed. So all that has occurred in terms of our financing in the third quarter happened under the already filed shelf prospectus. This was not a new shelf prospectus. What we did is file a prospectus supplement, which is required when you do a close a follow-on offering.
Understood. So I think where a lot of the disappointment, I guess, or the concern from the community is basically it's like we just reverse split, and then now right after the reverse split, there is dilution right on the horizon. So I mean, I feel like you cleared everything up in the way you phrased that, but do you just want to speak about the timing?
Yeah, well, in relation to the reverse split, I think it's also important to just look at the facts for that as well. So we undertook to do a reverse stock split. Our share count was way out of line with industry norms. Our reverse split brought that back into line. If you look at peer comparisons, it brought us back into a position that is more representative of growth biotech companies. It also was necessary to maintain our NASDAQ listing. It also put us in a position where other groups of investors, where institutional investors, we become more attractive by having a stock price that is more reflective of, again, where we are in terms of market cap and an overall organization. So reverse split, we understand optically that's always something that people tend to not love, but it was a necessary step to help us position well for the long-term future and to bring in the kind of investors, both hopefully open market purchasing, but also potential capital raising that we seek to build out into the future. Retail investors are an incredibly important portion of our capital structure, the vast majority. We think it's appropriate to balance that and to try to attract institutional and retail investment into the organization. And part of it was to do that. I also think it's just going back to the facts. When we look at metrics that are relevant to reverse stock splits, in 30 days after reverse stock split, our stock price was up. It was up until these wild accusations around our intellectual property started coming out. And over the course of days, 30% loss in value. So when we actually look at the fundamentals of what happened after the reverse split, our short interest, even on a split adjusted basis, short interest came down. So the facts actually say the reverse split did help us position well for the future. We certainly feel that that's the case. In terms of doing a financing post a reverse split, again, reverse split is somewhat necessary in order to attract the type of capital where there's a requirement and to avoid risks around the potential for delisting because we were out of compliance with NASDAQ.
Understood. So I would just we'll get back. We'll get to to the accusations and whatnot in the lawsuit or whatever at some point later in this, but like to focus more also on just the financing as well. So some of your peers, like I think Atai is a good example to bring up, is they went and they sought out non-dilutive financing. So I know that you guys got also offered some non-dilutive financing. So why did you guys end up turning that down? And yeah, just you could speak on that in terms of, and why decide to take this route.
Yeah, I guess I would just question which non-dilutive financing are you speaking of?
I think there was something where the Freemans were offering you guys financing.
If that's the case, we have yet to receive that offer.
Oh, okay. So then, listen, these could all be just rumors that are just circulating on Reddit. My apologies if that's a mistake. We'll let the people can fact check that if that's the case. So I'll take that question back, I guess. All right. So then, what is the current cash runway? How would this raise impact the current cash runway, at time and or milestone wise?
Yeah, so great question. And again, that's the most important thing here is that we ensure we have sufficient runway out into the future, that as we hit our milestones, we're well capitalized, we can effectively and very efficiently move into subsequent development phases and be fast in our development program. So where we are today, we have our quarterly earnings. What will happen sometime in November. We'll certainly announce the exact date as it gets a little closer. I can give at that point the most up-to-date financials. As of June 30th, as the end of the second quarter, we had a little over $105 million of cash. In the third quarter, we closed on $30 million under our ATM program and $30 million under our recently closed follow-on offering. And so where we are positioned today, if you just add those numbers up, it would be around $165 million. Based on our historical burn and based on our expectation, that would take us into 2025. So we'd have, at the time of our phase 2B readout, we'd have over a year of cash available to us, which is exactly the position that we want to be in. We also, if you look at the peer groups, it's also important to think, Compass, Atai, where are they in terms of positioning and the cash that's available to them? They have similar kind of runways if you look at the historical financials and the cash they have available to them today. So we think it positions us appropriately and that we're well capitalized out into the future beyond our phase 2 program.
Got you. Understood. I just want to go back just for a second. So did you guys attempt to secure any non-dilutive financing?
We have not announced any non-dilutive financing in the form of a debt financing or anything of that nature. We just haven't had any public disclosure around that at this point.
Okay, understood. All right, so the next question here is going to be, in 2020, MindMed ran dose-finding studies testing doses of LSD from 25 to 200 micrograms. MindMed has trial data from the UHB partnership. Why is this data not being leveraged to bypass phase 2B? And then also, like, there's a lot of people making comments about skipping the phase 2 and jumping into the phase 3. So if you can elaborate into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the study that's being referenced there would be a study in healthy volunteers that was conducted by Dr. Matthias Liechti at University Hospital Basel. So to be clear, the MM120 study, the phase 2B study that we're conducting, is really the second study. We have an ongoing study with ADHD, but it is the first dose response study that MindMed as an organization has ever conducted. There's a big distinction here that's really important. Investigator-initiated trials versus sponsored clinical research trials. Generally, investigator-initiated trials are referred to, and I've been in meetings with FDA where they said, we view those as hypothesis-generating trials. So they give you a lot of important information, and we are leveraging the UHB data. So the study you're referencing, again, I believe it was a study by Holstein and colleagues that was a dose response looking at the same doses that we are testing, 25, 50, 100, and 200 micrograms. They characterized the pharmacokinetics. They characterized some of the pharmacodynamics. We certainly got safety and tolerability data from the study, but it was not in a population such as generalized anxiety disorder. And I think it's also very tempting sometimes to say, oh, well, psychedelics, we know how they work. And as long as it has an effect, it's going to work in anxiety or depression. That is an assumption that we can't rely on, and that you need hard data to take to regulators and say, here is the data we can use to justify a response in this particular disease population and in generalized anxiety disorder. That study's never been conducted. And the study we're conducting right now is going to be the best dose response characterization ever done, to our knowledge, with LSD or any psychedelic, really. So it is really an important milestone. It answers some other questions that we know FDA is thinking about in the overall landscape of developing this drug class. And last thing I'll say is, and I think there's been a lot of commentary around Dr. Liechti and using those data. Again, we did use those data. That's why we were able to go right into a phase 2B, and you don't have to go in a phase 1 study and a proof of concept study. That's exactly what we've been doing. Dr. Liechti has also been involved in our clinical development planning. I spoke to him this morning, and he said, I absolutely support that this study that you're doing is the right study, that you shouldn't try to go right into phase 3. It's also not possible. There's no basis to actually do that. So again, I know everyone is excited and eager, me more than anyone, as much as anyone, to see this program progress as fast as possible, to be as efficient as possible, and get to a pivotal program. We have to do the comprehensive work along the way. We have to do it the right way if we're going to get there.
Well, thank you for the answer. All right, this brings me to my next question. So this is regarding MM-120. So does management have a clear path forward to solidifying IP surrounding MM-120, or an alternative plan that would create revenue from MM-120? This is like a 4-part question, just a heads up. Do you want me to just stop in the middle and you can just go, or should I just get it all out?
Why don't you get it all out, and I'll try to remember it all. I might ask you to refer back.
No problem. So does MindMed have exclusive rights to MM-120? Does Ceruvia have rights to MM-120? The lawsuit, or the unredacted documents in the lawsuit, allege that Ceruvia has freedom to operate in regards to MM-120. So can you comment on any of this?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking a question. It is a really important one, and one I hope to clear up once and for all. The allegations around our intellectual property are unfounded. We have not given away any intellectual property rights to our drug candidates. Now, precision in these discussions is critically important. Okay, so when we talk about LSD, we're not developing freebase LSD. We're developing LSD tartrate salt. We're developing a particular dosage form that we're going to take forward. We're developing and have intellectual property on those and other aspects of delivering our drug product. That's why we refer to it as MM-120, not just LSD. LSD freebase. So if you refer to LSD, right, you were talking about the freebase form of LSD that was discovered at Sandoz in the 1930s. The entire world has freedom to operate on LSD freebase. We don't have composition matter. We couldn't have tried to give it away. We couldn't have given it away. We did not give it away. We have not given away anything on our drug product candidates. And we have what we believe are very important value generating patent applications that are in various stages of being prosecuted right now. I am an inventor on several of those applications. These applications have been filed after all of the founders were no longer associated with the organization. We have built out the organization over the last 2 years to include some of the smartest medicinal chemists, regulatory professionals, clinical developers, and intellectual property experts to advise us on how we approach this. So look, I know that there's a lot of discussion out there from various investors calling things into question. It is baseless, and I am completely confident in our position around our intellectual property strategy.
All right. So based on what you're saying right now, so you mentioned LSD D-tartrate, right? That's MindMed's formulation.
That is the active pharmaceutical ingredient that we are seeking to develop, LSD tartrate.
And this is the one that you guys have. It's your intellectual property, correct?
It is the form of LSD that we have patent applications that have filed that we believe would be protective in terms of a market protection strategy.
So I just wanted to clarify this, just so people so the viewers can follow as well. So from what you're saying, so for LSD tartrate, Ceruvia or any other company, you guys would have no freedom to operate or any way to access that to operate within that patent, based on what you're saying.
Yeah, look, again, we have patent applications that are at various stages of being prosecuted. Once those patents are published and ultimately granted, assuming they are, which we certainly believe is the case, uh, once that happens, then the claims that are in those patents that are granted to us, no one will have the ability to use or operate within. We will have intellectual property if we are successful in those patents. Now, again, we can't say with 100% certainty any particular claim will or will not be granted. We're advised by some of the best patent attorneys out there. And so we feel very confident in how we've positioned it in our filings and our claims and our strategy. But it would be out of line for me to sit here and say, I can't say that we're going to do X, Y, and Z is going to be guaranteed. But
No, no, I understand.
we're very, very happy with where we are. And at that time, no one will be able to use our intellectual property.
Okay, that's what I think people are waiting to hear, is that they want to make sure that the MindMed's intellectual property is MindMed solely, not any other companies, just MindMed. So
That is absolutely the case. And I'll expand on this if you let me have just one more
of
second here
course.
to expand on, because I think it really, really is important. You know, sometimes analogies are a little bit easy to bring in here, right? So if you're building a car, right? Like you might build a car, and this maybe has its limitations, but you might build a car and you have a patent on the overall car. You might purchase an intermediate, you might purchase, metal or headlights from some organization. And that organization, if I'm the car company, I might not have patented that organization's form of steel or steel in general, or whatever metals are used in cars. But at the end of the day, I'm not trying to sell steel. I'm selling a car. I'm building a car. And so you can think of it the same way with drugs, right? So there's a number of components that come into drugs. If you're developing a capsule, for instance, you're going to purchase capsules from somebody, and there's going to be for the potential to have certain agreements in place. We say, well, look, I'm not going to try to say that I own your capsules now and you can't use them anymore. But at the end of the day, that's not what we're trying to do here. What we are doing is developing a drug product that we will take to market, that we believe we will have intellectual property around. And at that time, it is our product, is our intellectual property solely. And there is nothing out there that is going to get in the way of that, to our knowledge.
All right, thank you for clarifying. All right, this brings me to the next question. All right, was BOL 148 something MindMed ever considered at any time? If yes, is it still something being considered? If not, why not?
That's a bit of a hard question. I mean, at any time. So I've been with MindMed first as the chief development officer beginning in January of 2021, stepped in the role of CEO in June of last year. So whatever discussions happened before that time, I was not a party to. So to say at any time is a bit difficult for anyone to answer who wasn't there. Mm-hmm. Since I've been involved, there's not been any discussion about BOL148 or 2-bromo LSD being a part of MindMed. I also think given the broader economic context, given what we have already done and continue to do to try to control our cash resources, to control our spend, and make sure that we're able to extend our resources as far as possible, the concept of bringing in an additional development program at this time is going to be quite expensive, is not a match in our broader environment or our strategic plan right now. Now, at some point in the future, we certainly want to bring in additional programs, and we think there's a great opportunity in the long run to do that because we have such a strong R&D organization. But where we are today, we don't have plans to bring on an additional program right now.
Got you. I mean, in the past, I know there was a quote that was pulled up. I mentioned it in one of my other videos where you, I think you didn't obviously mention BOL148, but you spoke about a non-hallucinogenic form of LSD. So is that something that MindMed is working on that obviously has nothing to do with BOL148, or can you elaborate on what you were talking about at the time?
Yeah, I think you referenced the Forbes article, and I don't think BOL148 is referenced anywhere in that.
No,
article.
They don't mention it at all.
Yeah, I know Brian Roth's there, and I know Brian was on our SAB for a while. He's been looking at this for a long time. Delix Therapeutics is looking at psychoplastogens, non-hallucinogenic versions, and there's a bunch of organizations that are. We certainly have, with our collaboration with MindShift, Swiss group of medicinal chemists are looking to characterize all those molecules and looking for molecules that might have different activity that would be non-hallucinogenic analogs of classic psychedelics. I mean, you could put 18-MC in that camp. of being an analog of ibogaine that's not hallucinogenic. So, I'll certainly stand by a statement that if you could have a molecule, and theoretically, right, if you could have a molecule that you take one time and you see the sort of immediate and or rapid and prolonged response that you get with an LSD or a psilocybin, that would be amazing. Now, we have absolutely no idea if that's possible. It's very early stages, and there's so many organizations and molecules out there to screen and look at. That is much more uncertain and much earlier in development. But I mean, just conceptually, if that were to be the case, that would be a pretty impressive molecule. And again, that comment I'll stand behind because it has nothing to do with any particular molecule. It's a theoretical comment on a area of research that we and others are looking at.
Awesome. Thank you so much for clarifying. All right, next question. So why do you think some investors have recently lost confidence in the company? This was a Reddit question.
Yeah, it's something that we certainly hope to restore. I think the thing I'll say first and foremost that we hear loud and clear, and we're going to, commit right now. I'm glad to be here with you today and hope we can do this again, is there needs to be more communication from us. And we hear you, and I will commit right now to doing that. We want to be more communicative with our shareholders. Certainly, the market environment has not helped. It's been a very challenging 18 months for biotech generally. The accusations that have been put out there by certain investors are obviously something that makes people have uncertainty. It makes them wonder about things, and minds wandering in different directions can create a situation where people are having challenges. I also understand the perception and the questions you've already asked around our recent equity financings, reverse stock split. And I'll also use this opportunity to zoom out a little bit and say, over the last 18 months, or really over the last 2 years since I came into the organization, we have really tried to right the ship. We really try to build from an organization that was sort of a shell of what it is today. And I completely recognize that is not reflected in the stock price, right? That's a reality that you can look at the price and say it has come down. We have done everything with the long term in mind. We've done everything to try to set up structurally for long term success and to position ourselves both from the organization internally and to the broader world to be in the best shape possible. So as these various things have happened, as corporate events have happened, as a bunch of commentary has come out there, and certainly there's many factors at play in terms of why investors may have lost confidence. I will say, again, while I hear from some of our investors dissatisfaction with the recent financing we did, there's a 13G filed yesterday. We had institutional investors who looked at our organization as it is today, our strategy, our intellectual property strategy, and placed their vote of confidence in us and our strategy by investing considerable capital. And these are experienced biotech investors, right? So again, I understand there's a lot of factors that have been going on. Certainly, to the extent we have come up short in terms of communication, we'll try to remedy that. But I'm fully confident that this organization has never been in better shape. We have never had better people, and we have never been better positioned for the long-term success and actually drive value for our shareholders.
Thank you for the response. I will go on record and say I will happily have you on here whenever you'd like to talk to the community. If you want to do quarterly updates, whatever it might be, if you just want to come here and say hi, happily have you on here. That go on record just to say that, please.
Perfect.
All right, next question. All right, so this is kind of building on the lost confidence stuff, because these are some that have come from Reddit, so they're grouped together here. Currently, there is a perception of incongruence between shareholders and leadership of this company. The view of management collecting significant salaries and cashing in a bunch of stock ahead of tangible value creation for shareholders. Do you think this view is valid? If so, are you leading to better this dichotomy? And then the follow-up to that is, why do you keep selling stock?
Yeah, so we can talk about that comprehensively. Just say that, I like everything else we've done in building this organization over the last year and a half, it has been to follow our industry norms, to be data driven, and to be independent with how everything is set and done. So, in terms of compensation, in terms of our equity incentive programs, uh, this is something that the compensation committee and the board takes up independently. We've brought in, highly experienced and respected board members who have sat on other public company boards who have this experience. The board and the compensation committee use independent compensation consultants to use industry norms to set a compensation program. And it's really important for a public company to ensure retention of our management team and all of our employees. I mean, these are the people who work tirelessly to drive the meaningful milestones that we're seeking to achieve over the next many years to come, but in particular over the next year and a half as we approach a real key readout next year. As part of equity incentive programs generally, and as part of ours, we do issue a mix, and all of this is within our public filings, a mix of RSUs and stock options. To the extent those RSUs are vesting, a percentage of that is sold in the market to cover income taxes. That is a sort of standard practice for share-based or RSU-based equity incentive programs. I mean, speaking frankly, in terms of alignment, the vast majority of my personal net worth of my income is in our equity. I mean, I have as much incentive as anyone to ensure the long-term value creation. And again, I understand that over the past 12 months that this has been a very difficult period for the market generally, for MindMed in particular, and that right now, today, it has come down significantly. We fully believe that everything we have done over the last year has been to structurally improve the business and to position us for long-term success. And why I don't personally have millions of dollars sitting around to pay income taxes every single month. I have not made a single discretionary sale. I have no plans to make a single discretionary sale. Every part of how our compensation is structured is aligned with shareholders, and we intend to keep it that way. I'm here, and everyone we've recruited into the organization is here to drive actual benefits to patients in need. Through that, to drive value creation for our shareholders. It stocks, the general market in our stock obviously can trade up, it can trade down. We're going to deliver on our programs, deliver on our milestones, and through doing that, drive tangible value creation that we believe will be reflected in our stock price in the long run.
Got you. And just something that kind of I got reminded when you were just saying that also, in terms of when you had mentioned the timing of the dilution earlier when we spoke, in terms of the way you were forecasting things going on the market. So is it to say that you're forecasting that, let's say, a year from now, you're predicting, or whatever experts you guys have on staff are essentially predicting the markets are still going to have all these economic tailwinds going on, and the price will be uncertain at that point too?
Yeah, I'm certainly not a capital markets expert first and foremost in terms of predicting the future. And we know even the folks who claim to be, projecting the future of economics and financial markets is a very challenging thing to do. What we have to do, and when we have to make hard decisions like when to raise capital, and I just, before I go in, we take that very seriously. We understand the implications. It affects all of our shareholders. It affects all of our employees. It affects every single one of us. We take that very seriously. What we have to do, though, is ensure that we are insulated from the vagaries of the macroeconomic environment. I mean, the Fed is showing signs of raising interest rates. Earlier this year, and at the end of last year in particular, the financing window for biotech companies effectively closed. We've seen, I don't know the exact count today, but it's under a dozen IPOs this entire year in healthcare. So where the broader markets are and where there's significant uncertainty, it would be imprudent of us to allow a continuation into that uncertainty and not have the financial resources to be insulated from that and to be able to continue and deliver on our program. So while I can't sit here and say today the S&P or the Russell or the XBI is going to be at this level up or down, it's the uncertainty about that future from the broad economic headwinds that means we need to ensure we are insulated, that we're in a good position financially to have that longevity.
Understood. Thanks for responding to that. Okay, next question. So this is going to be about 18MC. So what happened with 18MC? Was it put on the back burner for financial reasons, technical reasons, or both? Freeman mentioning that trialing 18MC for opiate addiction as opposed to withdrawal would be a better route to take. What is your take on this?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Q2, we made the difficult decision and announced in our earnings call that we were reallocating our resources to our other programs away from our MM110 program, and that we're going to be exploring non-dilutive sources of capital and potential partnerships or business development opportunities to answer some of those questions that were raised about the non-clinical package for MM110. This was a data-driven decision. It was partly a financial decision. The package of non-clinical data that FDA was asking us for would take many months, if not years, and a considerable amount of financial resources. And it has an uncertain outcome. It's not a guarantee that we do that research and we're positioned where they would say, yes, you can move forward into a phase 2 program. All of that together, based on our need to focus our resources and based on our need to invest in the programs that we believe have the highest likelihood of success and represent the best value to our organization, our shareholders, is why we made that difficult decision. Now, in terms of the market and the indication and the dosing, again, I think there's some confusion that needs to be cleared up. So opioid use disorder, there are three different drugs and multiple drug products of those APIs or those drugs that are approved for the opioid use disorder market. Those clinical trials require 6 months clinical outcomes, right? 24 weeks is the standard for opioid use disorder. That's compared to 7 days for opioid withdrawal. In opioid withdrawal, there's also only one approved therapy, lofexidine. So from a market dynamic standpoint, from an investment standpoint, in terms of the cost to run a chronic program versus an acute program, and from what we believe would be the likelihood of technical success, we were approaching this program in the treatment of opioid withdrawal. The concept that has been put out there by some about exploring a 30-day dose of MM110, I'm not really clear on how that relates to a 6-month outcome. That's the standard. We've also talked to regulatory and opioid use disorder experts. These are advisors to our program. These are some of the folks who were at our KOL event that we held earlier in the year on this program. Now, where the biggest need in this population is really in that early period of withdrawal and early relapse. That's a large part for the rationale for where we focus the program. And based on the feedback we received from FDA, our R&D team, which is made up of highly experienced regulatory and clinical development experts, we looked at this, we made an assessment, and based again on that technical assessment and on the financial assessment of how we can be most effective with our resources, we made the difficult decision to reallocate those primarily to our MM120 program and also to our MM402 program.
Is 18MC something that you guys might revisit at some point in the future?
Certainly, we certainly think there's a potential opportunity in the future, and that's why we are exploring other non-dilutive sources of capital to explore some of those preclinical studies. We're looking at opportunities. We've had some expressed interest by outside parties in an opportunity to collaborate on looking at MM110. So as we progress through that, and as we advance in time, we certainly keep our minds very much open. If the data point us in a different direction, or if there's a different decision that's indicated by the data that emerge, we'll make the decision at that time. But today, where we are, both financially and from a regulatory and technical standpoint, this was the right decision, and we're going to stick by it for the time being.
All right, cool. So the next question is a mixture of a Reddit question and then and then some of my own as well. So this is like there's a lot of parts to this question. So we'll be patient with each other. Um, all right. Can you provide the shareholders with tangible proof of IP and patents regard to the drugs currently in phase 2 and phase 1 development? So we'll start with that.
Yes. So I'll point first and foremost to our most recent 10K. And we describe the various applications we filed on all of the product candidates we're developing and other molecules we're assessing. Um, I know that there's, and I like Adam, I know you've made comments before too about wanting to know more about those applications. And I feel like it's worth explaining more about why it would not be prudent for us to share a greater level of detail. So we have filed a number of patent applications. We are prosecuting those applications as they publish, as they get granted, hopefully in the future. Uh, all of this information will certainly come out there. I myself am an inventor, as I've already said, on what I believe are some of the most valuable applications we've had that have been filed relatively recently. Now, the reason it's not prudent for us to go out and say, well, we have X, Y, and Z claim on this, that, and the other, is because we live in a very competitive field. We also work in an area where other organizations take proactive stances to try to stop companies from getting intellectual property on psychedelics. So every bit of detail, if I were to provide it, our competitors and those who don't want to see us get patents would immediately take that, and they'd have the advantage of information and the advantage of time to try to get in the way of us being successful with our patent strategy. So I know you're not gonna, no one likes it. I wish it wasn't that way. I certainly wish we lived in a world where I could say right now, oh, here's exactly what we're doing and give everyone visibility to a great level of detail. But it's just not the reality of the field we're in or the environment we operate in. And so we have to take a prudent approach to filing our IP, prosecuting it, and not oversharing information until we have successfully prosecuted those applications and hopefully get those claims granted. I would be the day we get a patent granted, I'd be more than happy to come back on here and talk you through exactly how we think about that.
I got you, and I understand. I feel like in terms of my critique of like the statement of like keeping stuff close to the chest and stuff, because I have said that before. I've been critical of that statement before. Had more so to do is like in terms of like that was said about over a year and a half. Like it was over a year ago when that was said, and since then we still haven't seen much materialize. So it was if it was just a couple months, or let's say it was 8 to 10 months, I would have been like, all right, well, let's see what's going to materialize. But given the amount of time it's taken and nothing has really come up, and then with this shitstorm of stuff going on around with Freeman's, with you guys, with the markets, like it came to a head in some capacity.
Yeah, look, I hear you, and I know patience is a thing that in our industry, it takes a long time for a lot of things to happen. Drug development takes a long time. Patent prosecution takes a long time. And again, importantly, we have been doing significant work that is, we believe, generated innovations that are patentable. And obviously, the benefit is that the later in development that you file a patent, assuming it gets in the Orange Book and assuming it is protective of your product, the longer tail you have in terms of the protection window. And so some of the patent filings have converted quite recently. And so it does take a long time for those US and PCT applications to be prosecuted, to publish, to be granted. Again, we are certainly very, very comfortable and feel very confident in our position there and what we are doing. And as those do become published, I'm happy to expand on that. But that's going to have to be driven by patent timelines for when those applications are ultimately published and or granted.
Gotcha. Thanks for the reply. All right, so the follow up to that is: does MindMed currently have exclusive rights to produce these drugs, the ones that you guys have in phase 2 and phase 1?
Like our programs that we are leading that are product candidates are MM120, MM402, and MM110. For each of those products, we have filed patent applications. And based on the stage of development and how much work we have undertaken, it really has driven those patent applications, those filings. I want to be clear. There are other studies that are ongoing with UHB, for instance, with DMT and mescaline. We do have some applications. All of our patent applications are described generally in our 10K filing. So we point you there to see the scope of those applications. And it includes other molecules that aren't yet in phase 1 or any sort of clinical trials to date. So we do have patent applications. We file and protect our patents rigorously. We are very aggressive with how we try to approach this and make sure that we are getting the best market protection for any products we are developing or would develop into the future.
So, based on what you're saying, is that a yes or no in terms of that you guys would have exclusive rights to anything that you guys would get patents on that you have in phase 2 and phase 1 currently?
Yeah, anything we have patents on is we own, we have exclusive rights, and we will use to protect our market.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so okay, so this is building on that. This is what I told you. This is like a multiple, like a hydra of a question. So, does Ceruvia or any other company have the ability to produce any of these drugs once FDA approved? And do you, MindMed, have any agreement with Ceruvia or any other company around IP rights?
So I think it's really important to clarify something about producing and the overall process here, right? So all this comes down to market protection strategy. And I've made comments generally about kind of IP in this landscape previously. And the really important thing to know is that where patents come into play for drugs, for pharmaceutical products, is getting a patent listed in the Orange Book. That is what matters the most. Okay. So when we file one day, assuming we're successful with our development program, we file a new drug application with FDA. As part of that, LSD in any of its forms has not ever been approved in the past, and we believe that we would get 5 years of marketing exclusivity. When you have a patent that is listed in the Orange Book, a second generation manufacturer, so that would be an organization like a generic company, could file what's called a 505(b)(2) application or a 505(j) application. In so doing, they have to use, if they're trying to use a previously approved drug or drug product, such as one we would get approved, they would have to reference our NDA filing. So our drug would become what's called a reference listed drug. Through that process, patents that are listed in the Orange Book, we are able to effectively, again, assuming that we're effective in our patent filings, those patents are granted, and those patents that are granted are ultimately listed in the Orange Book. We would seek to use those to block generic entrants from filing an application. There's a prescribed process where you can get a 30-month stay on generic applications if they're infringing on a patent. It can then go to the court process. This is something that plays out all the time for pharmaceutical companies and generic manufacturers. At the end of the day, a generic manufacturer, whoever it may be, has to file one of those 505 applications in order to get a product approved and to market it as a pharmaceutical product. So the fact that we own our intellectual property, that we will use all the patents we get granted, that we own exclusively, to get Orange Book listed patents and then use those to aggressively protect against any subsequent applications. That is the process whereby we would keep any sort of second generation manufacturers at bay. That is the important process for market protection and to protect our potential revenue and profits one day in the future.
Understood. So basically that was the short of that is basically anyone, including Ceruvia, will not have rights to produce. It's your guys. This is MindMed's intellectual property once you get the patent granted, and you'll do everything you can to protect that intellectual property.
Absolutely. Second part of your question about agreements that intersect with intellectual property. Again, precision in our industry, whether it's intellectual property or development or any aspect of a pharmaceutical program, precision is incredibly important. I mentioned before, and again, this is why I have to say it this way, because we do have suppliers of various kinds for various starting materials, for intermediates. We work with a number of organizations who supply various components. Sometimes those include intellectual property. This is the steel analogy. If I buy steel from a steel company, I'm probably going to agree, well, no, I'm not going to try to patent your steel and say you can't sell it anymore. Okay, but for our products that we're developing, for the drug products, the API, for the formulation that we are developing, MM120, MM402. Again, assuming we have those patents granted, no one else has rights to those, and we will protect those vigorously. We will make sure we do everything in our power to maximize the market protection of our products.
Awesome. So on to the next question then. So this was building off of this. So basically, once again, now we're going to start to get into the part of the questions which is going to revolve more around the lawsuit and whatnot. And I'm happy we just started dipping our toes in. Now you gave a lot of the explanations around IP. Based off the allegations in the unredacted documents that released. So are you aware of any other MindMed IP that has been mishandled?
Look, I don't know of any MindMed IP that has been mishandled. We work again with some of the best corporate lawyers, IP lawyers. Everything we have done in terms of our filings and the patent applications that I have made, that others in our organization have made, have been extensively reviewed and looked at. All of our agreements have been extensively reviewed and looked at. Very comfortable with our IP position and our contractual agreements that are in place.
All right, thank you. All right, so now we're getting into Hurst and Turnbull. Have you had any communication with Stephen Hurst since he left the board? Can you talk about your history with Hurst?
Look, so Steve Hurst is someone I met when I worked at USONA Institute. So I think if you know my background, I for a period of time, I worked for USONA Institute developing psilocybin for major depressive disorder. It was an incredible experience. It certainly gave me an enormous amount of exposure to FDA and insights into developing this drug class. Carrie Turnbull is a funder of psychedelic research, including having associations with USONA Institute. It's where I met Carrie Turnbull for the first time. It's where I met Steve Hurst for the first time. So I have been acquainted with them intermittently. About June of 2020, I had left USONA after the pandemic, and at that time, had discussions with MindMed. Steve introduced me to Miri Halpern-Wernley, who's our president, and frankly, the organization needed a lot of help with progressing the MM120 program. I was brought in initially, worked with MindMed as a consultant, and then over time, as I got to know Miri better, as I got to a little bit of discussion with J.R. Ron, who at the time was co-CEO with Hurst, they asked me to come on as the chief development officer to build out the team, to position the organization, to do all the things I've described that we've sought to do and been very successful, frankly, in doing over the last year and a half in terms of improving the organization structurally and positioning us well for the future. Steve Hurst is not someone who I'm in regular touch with. I'm not in regular touch with any of the founders of the organization. That is not to say, I mean, again, in the interest of being as transparent as possible, prior shareholders, executive, there are periodic questions that people have about something to do with the company. So I can't say that there's been no contact with really anybody, any particular party, but there's been no real substantive dialogue or anything of any seriousness or a regular interval.
All right. Thank you for talking about that. So now we're going to build on this again. And you already mentioned the connection at USONA. So you, Turnbull, and Hurst got familiar at USONA together. So Turnbull is one of the founders of Ceruvia. Now, MindMed donated $5 million to the NYU Langone School of Psychedelic Medicine, which Turnbull is on the advisory board for. Do you see how these connections can make investors uneasy, considering the current allegations against Ceruvia regarding MindMed IP? And you already talked about, you already spoke about your current relationship with Carrie Turnbull. You can elaborate that on more if you'd like to, but yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I have no contact with Carrie Turnbull. In terms of donation to NYU and these these are events that happened before I had any involvement or any knowledge of them happening. So again, I really can't speak. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't in those discussions at that time. Um, there has been no more NYU donations or anything of that nature since I've been here. Now, listen, we're a company, right? I mean, what prior executives or prior people in the organization do, if there's a contractual obligation, we obviously have to live by those contracts. So if someone signs a donation that is a valid legal contract, you know, we have to continue making those payments to any of our vendors. So uh, I certainly, that's to the extent of my knowledge in terms of NYU donations, is that we continue to fund a donation to NYU that was made by prior management. But again, I do know it's a small world in organizations that are working on psychedelics. But just to be very, very clear, at MindMed, since I have been an employee of MindMed, we have taken every step to bring in highly experienced professionals from the pharmaceutical industry. And to any extent that there's been any sort of overlap with an other organization from historical people, I have ended that. We have ended that. There's no more of that. So we do not have any ongoing relationship. I know that again, certain investors are out there saying certain things, but I would just to be clear once and for all, that is trying to, I think, distort reality. I can't speak to why that would be, but it's just not factual.
Understood. Thanks for the reply, and I'm gonna let you elaborate on that a little more in just a second because there's more questions that are attached to that. Oh, the next question. So once again, this is more regarding Hurst and Turnbull. We're gonna just this is going to be, I think, the last question in regards to Hurst and Turnbull, and then we're gonna move on to something else. So, are you aware that Hurst and Turnbull are connected through CH-TAC, which eventually became Ceruvia? Hurst, one of the founders of CH-TAC, which is now Ceruvia, who was also an officer of Ceruvia at some point, and also signed the BOL-148 patent. And also there was the phone number of MindMed is on the patent as well. Like that. So I think this is one of the main things that people are looking at and they're like, what the hell is going on? In terms of, you have Hurst, who's a former founder of MindMed. He signed the BOL-148 patent. MindMed's phone number is still on the BOL-148 patent. And essentially now it belongs to Ceruvia. And at one point it belonged to Savant. So can you speak on any of this, of anything that you know?
Yeah, I got to tell you, Adam, these agreements and discussions that some people have been alleging are things I really don't have direct knowledge, and it just wouldn't be responsible for me to speculate on something that happened in the past that I really wasn't a part of or don't have any direct knowledge of. So, if I knew more, I would tell you. But at this point, again, I know that there's a lot of discussion out there around this. I do have to say, one of the things that, because of that, I think it's also really important that all of our investors look at the fact that there is this ongoing litigation out there involving some individuals that were connected to MindMed in the past, right? The timeline for all of this activity and when this has happened in relation to that lawsuit is something that certainly raises eyebrows, I think. And so, again, I would say more if I knew more or had direct insights, but yeah, at this point, I'm not going to comment on the specific litigation or weigh in or opine. Again, that would be irresponsible and would open the company up to potential issues. So that's about the most I can offer on that one, I'm afraid.
Awesome. No, that was sufficient. And when you were brought into MindMed, did you have any connection to Hurst or Turnbull?
Yeah, I met both of them. Before joining MindMed, I worked as a consultant for a variety of CNS organizations. So it is a small world of organizations, even the smaller world several years ago in terms of who was trying to work with psychedelics. When I was brought into MindMed to come on as chief development officer, I believe at that time or right around that time, we had JR was either the co-CEO or was just about to become the sole CEO. I was brought in because I worked on the MM120 program initially as a consultant, led a very successful, or what I believe was a very successful meeting with FDA. Worked very closely with Miri, who's still our executive president, and ultimately came and said, we need to build, there needs to be an organization that can really deliver on the promise of this drug class. And there are some, but I think the vision that we have, that I've tried to bring to MindMed, is one that I think will be successful in the long run, that will allow us to leverage a mental health infrastructure that exists today, and that will ultimately be successful in helping to bring these new products to the patients who need them. So I was brought into the organization to set up that organization, to build out the R&D team, and then ultimately took over as CEO to build out the entire organization. And I think if you look at the quality of individuals who we've been able to bring in over the last 18 months, this is exactly what we've been successful in doing.
Awesome. And I guess like to kind of put this to rest, like some of the Ceruvia stuff to rest is like, so you have no connection to Ceruvia. Do you have any connection to Ceruvia? Do you stand to gain from anything that Ceruvia does or anything like that? If you could just let the watchers, let them know.
Yeah, I have no ongoing contact or relationship with anyone at Ceruvia, just to be clear. I have absolutely nothing to gain from anything that they would benefit from. I have certainly a significant amount to gain from us being successful, from our shareholders and our organization being successful, right? I mean, again, alignment, in terms of alignment, we are all in this together. We're trying to do things for the right reason because it's going to help people, but it's also going to drive, I believe it's going to drive incredible value for our organization. And again, stand to directly benefit from that. The vast majority of my compensation and all of our executive team's compensation is in equity in MindMed. So, I mean, frankly, I would be insane to do anything that would harm MindMed or jeopardize that. And I stand only to gain from MindMed being successful.
Can you talk about how many shares of MindMed you still hold in total?
I'll have to go back to the precise numbers, on our Form 3 and 4 filings. And I only say that because we have equity grants that vest over a number of years. And so in terms of what I actually hold versus what might be out there, all of this is current on our Form 3 and 4 filings. And so certainly would point you there to the precise numbers.
All right. So, all right. Next question here is, so were you aware of any MindMed contractors who concurrently worked for Ceruvia on LSD, and MindMed contractors who currently work for MindMed who also worked for Ceruvia on MM110, 120 or BOL 148? I know BOL 148 preceded you, but
yeah. So in terms of our employees, again, to whatever extent that was a historical thing, when I came into the organization, we ended it. All right. That is no longer, none of our employees work, or to my knowledge, have any relationship with Ceruvia or any other organization like that.
So you guys cleaned house. When you came back in, you cleaned house. You're like, we don't want any more Ceruvia up in here.
We made decisions to position MindMed to be a standout powerhouse of a CNS organization. I don't know that I would use the word cleaned house, but we made a number of significant transitions, from the board to the management team to some of the R&D employees. And over the course of the last 18 months I feel the thing I feel most rewarding about what we've accomplished is the incredible people we have brought into the organization. These people have incredible careers in big pharma and successful mid-sized pharma companies who have come to join our organization. I mean, you can look at our investor presentation for the kind of backgrounds and profiles of the people we've brought into the organization. So we made some significant changes. I'm glad we made those changes, and we have not looked back. We will not take a step backwards, and we're going to continue building out the stellar organization we have today.
Well said. All right. Up next, we got here. So there are potentially damaging allegations regarding misconduct alleged against Ceruvia and Hearst. There were several MindMed employees who are now working for Ceruvia, including several who are working on LSD at both companies. I'm sorry to keep harping on this. At the same time, what steps has MindMed taken, if any, to ensure that proprietary information was never or not transferred to Ceruvia?
Yeah, again, I think speaks volumes to the changes that we've made in the organization. We have our the contractors and our employees are subject to confidentiality agreements, proprietary invention assignment agreements. That again, all this is disclosed in our public filings, but we have taken every step since I came into the organization to ensure that everything that is ours stays ours. There's no external dissemination of information, and that ultimately we have a very clean organization in terms of who's there and any connectivity they have out to the broader world.
Okay. Next question here. So I know you were talking about how there. So basically, there's one. I know it might be difficult to comment on one specific person in general, but so in the unredacted documents, they mention Nico Fort, and he is an ongoing friend of Stephen Hurst. So, and he's currently an employee of MindMed. So, is there anything you can comment around that in terms of just like optically?
I mean, we don't hire or fire people for who they're friends with.
Mm-hmm.
We hire people on and keep employees based on their performance and their delivery and their fit in the organization. Nico is a valuable employee of ours who's been incredibly helpful and helped progress our organization. So I'm certainly not going to have anything negative to say about any of our employees.
I got you. All right. So, next question. Given the timing of Cynthia Hu's exit, were you aware of any internal governance reviews by Cynthia Hu or anyone else? The follow-up to this is the community is under the impression that there is no corporate secretary at this point. Can you verify this? If there isn't, why?
Yeah, so in terms of Cynthia's departure, I mean, look, people leave positions for any number of reasons, and I'm going to respect her. I'm not going to just speak about her as an individual. And Cynthia's someone who I respect immensely. I've got a great relationship with, who has still been an advisor to MindMed and helped us hit some of those really key structural endpoints. I mean, again, I don't want to go too far down off in a tangent here, but when Cynthia joined us at the end of last year, we were in the final days of needing to hit some really important governance milestones in terms of positioning ourselves to be a U.S. issuer, which we became at the beginning of this year. She did an incredible amount of work to position us so we could file our 10K for the first time, a 10K U.S. securities filing annual report, to getting our securities filings, our S3 up in May of this year, to helping to navigate all of the structural changes that I've been laying out. Cynthia was very impactful, and again, I have an immense amount of respect for her. We're going to bring in an additional chief legal officer or GC, ahead of our legal operations, and that person will likely be named the corporate secretary at that time.
All right. Okay, that makes sense. But currently, right now, there's no chief legal officer, correct?
We don't currently have a chief legal officer. No, we're actively sourcing potential experienced individuals.
Resumes, guys.
Yeah.
All right. So next question here, and I guess we're kind of getting towards the tail end of this. Thank you so much for spending this much time with me. I really do appreciate it, Rob.
Pleasure.
So how do you anticipate to bring back the stellar confidence retail once had in MindMed? So I think this is something that kind of encapsulates everything you've been talking about within this Q&A. But I feel like if you can kind of like bring everything together. So it's like, how would you bring back that significant amount of like bullishness and euphoria that retail really had for MindMed? That it seems like there are a lot of very diehard supporters for MindMed still, but there has definitely been ever since the reverse split and all the Freeman stuff started going on and everything surrounding that, things have definitely gone a little dicey. So how would you recapture all of that?
Look, I'll point to what drives value in biotech companies is delivering on important clinical development inflection points. The biggest driver, the biggest inflection, the milestone, the readout we have comes in the second half of next year with our MM120 program. And that's something that we are all working feverishly to achieve. Um, we're going to enhance our communication. Again, I appreciate you being here and being a way to communicate directly with this group of our shareholders. We're going to continue delivering on our business, on the strategy we've laid out, making progress, taking those important steps to get our intellectual property hopefully granted and those claims more disseminated so everyone can see what they are once they are granted, hopefully. Delivering on our drug development strategy, hitting our regulatory and development milestones. Again, we're going to deliver on our business and we're going to enhance our communication. I'm out again in San Francisco at an investor conference right now. We're going to continue to broaden the visibility of MindMed and try to ensure that our retail investors, our institutional investors, that across the board, everyone recognizes the enormous promise and value we see in the organization.
So I guess to build on that is, why did it take so long for you guys to come out and kind of it's like speak to the public in regards to everything that was going on? Because the allegations that were coming out against, obviously not directly at MindMed, but were involving MindMed, were pretty significant, and they clearly hurt the stock price. So why the lag time in between then and then coming on now?
Well, part of this, look, when we have investors who are out making accusations or making requests, we try to respect the privacy of some of those discussions. I mean, we were going into discussions with some of those investors, to try to resolve it amicably and privately. And I think we don't view it as beneficial to anyone to come out publicly with, coming out and saying this, that, and the other. That is something that I think you said it yourself, right? And that those allegations that have been drumming up a lot of questions have caused damage to our stock price and the confidence. And so, to a certain extent, is trying to resolve things that we can amicably and privately. And to another extent, there's certainly occasionally there are events that happen that, from a securities law standpoint, prohibit us from coming out and saying too much publicly. So, again, I recognize that now is the time we wanted to come out and have this discussion, and we want to continue to ramp up the frequency and the amount of engagement we have with our investors, retail community, and make sure that we are proactive in engaging that group.
Got you. I just want to say this as well. As much as I do think that the Freemans had an effect on the stock price in some capacity, I want to say that it also was the timing of the reverse split followed by the dilution as well. It's not like there is blame to go around in terms of what's been going on with the stock price. It's not. I don't think it's just one thing. Even though I do agree with you that did have some type of effect as well. All right, so that's the end of my Q&A. I wanted to give you a chance to address retail investors if you'd like to. If not, it's totally cool. And I wanted to say I appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Rob. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Adam. No, look, again, we hear you loud and clear. The desire for more communication, I think, from the entire retail community is not lost on us. Again, I'll make a commitment right now that we will improve that, and appreciate the thoughtful questions and thoughtful conversation we've had today. I mean, what I will say again, over the last 18 months, over the last almost 2 years now, we have sought to really structurally improve MindMed for the long term. That is our strategy from an organizational evolution. Our strategy from an R&D standpoint is one that we believe is the most efficient. It is informed by experience I have, experience our incredible R&D team has. These are people who have brought numerous products to market. We are going to continue to execute on that strategy to deliver on our milestones. And we hope through that, through the recognition of the value that we will be creating and have been creating, and through continued engagement that we're able to continue to build confidence across all of the investment community, and that we hit these milestones, we take steps to get closer to product application, marketing application, and ultimately, every day when we wake up, every meeting that we have, we start orienting around the fact that we do all this because there is an extraordinary need for the treatments that we are developing, and we think we can have a meaningful impact for the patients, and through that process generate incredible value to our shareholders. That's why we get up every day. That's why our team works tirelessly to do this. We appreciate the patients. We appreciate the fact that it drug development timelines, and particularly in challenging macroeconomic environments, all of this adds up and can create a difficult sort of psychology around where the markets are, where a particular stock or organization is trading. But we are going to stay focused, focus our resources, and deliver on the strategy that we've laid out and the incredible organization we've built over the last 2 years.
All right. Thank you so much, Rob. And I appreciate everyone for watching. This is Adam with Psychedelic Invest and Robert Barrow with MindMed. Have a great weekend, guys.
Thanks, Adam.